It's not like you can really peak at one point. So I don't know, like to play well in a Grand Slam.
No one imagined that a story involving Iga Świątek, the world's most disciplined and mentally untouchable tennis champion, and Hubert Hurkacz, Poland's quiet ATP powerhouse, would begin with something as fragile as a whisper. Yet that is exactly how the storm started. Not with a headline, not with a photo, but with a moment. A moment someone wasn't supposed to witness. It took place behind the practice courts in Cincinnati. Sweat, dust, the fading roar of the crowd, nothing unusual. But a physio walking past froze for half a second, because right there, standing closer than two fellow countrymen typically would, were Świątek and Hurkacz, locked in a conversation that looked far more personal than professional. It wasn't the words. No one heard a single sentence. It was the energy, that unmistakable tension between two people trying very hard to look casual, and failing. Świątek, normally a fortress of focus, was smiling in a way fans rarely get to see. Hurkacz, usually calm and reserved, leaned in just a little too close, as if trying to catch every breath she released. It was subtle, impossibly subtle, but in the secret world of elite sport, subtlety is often where the truth hides. At first, only a few supporters noticed. A short clip on social media, a slowed-down analysis of their eye contact, a frame-by-frame breakdown of the few seconds where they walked off court together. It could have been nothing, until it became something. Because later that evening, both players, instead of returning to their teams, slipped quietly out of the tournament grounds. No coaches, no agents, no entourage. Just Iga and Hubert, heading toward a small candlelit restaurant tucked away from the city noise. And that was when the whispers exploded. Fans described the atmosphere between them as magnetic. Świątek laughing softly at something Hubert said. Hubert watching her with a kind of gentle attention no camera had ever captured during a match. Two athletes who built their careers on discipline were suddenly, unmistakably, letting their guard down. The internet lit up with theories. Was this the beginning of Poland's greatest sporting duo? A friendship intensified by the pressures of global tennis? Or the first spark of a romance neither of them intended to reveal? No one knew. But one thing was certain. They didn't hide from each other that night. They chose each other. And once two athletes of this caliber step outside the script the world expects them to follow, the story begins to write itself. And it becomes impossible to ignore. If Cincinnati was the spark, then New York was the wildfire. By the time Iga Świątek and Hubert Hurkacz arrived at the U.S. Open, the whispers had evolved into something more persistent. The kind of speculation that slips through the cracks of press rooms and finds its way into the murmurs of seasoned reporters. But even then, most believed the buzz would die out once the lights of Arthur Ashe Stadium flickered on. After all, Iga's laser-focused routine leaves no space for distractions, and Hubert is famously private, a man who lets his racket speak for him. But what happened in New York changed everything. It started with the simplest of moments. Hubert feeding balls to Iga during a closed practice session. No coaches, no team members, just the two of them. Observers assumed it was a patriotic gesture, two Polish stars supporting each other. But the details told a different story. Świątek's laughter between points, soft and unguarded. The way Hurkacz watched her footwork, not like a colleague, but like someone who cared. And then the body language. Relaxed, familiar, almost intimate. Not the kind of closeness forged by training, the kind shaped by trust. A day later, fans noticed something even more unusual. Hubert, normally a reserved presence in the stands, appeared during Iga's match, cheering harder than anyone expected. His applause wasn't the typical polite support players give each other. It was personal, emotional, almost protective. He didn't flinch when cameras caught him. He just kept watching her, eyes steady, as if the rest of the stadium didn't exist. And then came the moment that shifted the entire narrative of the tournament. Just hours before one of Iga's biggest matches, paparazzi lenses captured Hurkacz escorting Świątek through the entrance of the Waldorf Astoria, one of Manhattan's most exclusive hotels. No entourage, no handlers, no attempt to separate themselves or hide. Inside sources whispered about a private suite, champagne waiting on ice, fresh flowers arranged on a table. Not the kind hotels prepare by default, but the kind you choose intentionally. It wasn't a scandal, but it wasn't innocent either. Fans began drawing comparisons to legendary sporting couples, Agassi and Graf, Beckham and Victoria, two icons from the same nation, finding solace in each other amidst global scrutiny. And the parallels felt stronger with every passing day. Because Świątek started showing up at Hubert's matches too. No cameras followed her. She slipped in quietly, almost invisibly, sitting just far enough from the coach's box to avoid suspicion, but close enough that those who noticed could no longer deny what they were seeing. Her expression when he won a critical point, his glance toward the stands, just long enough to confirm she was there. It wasn't scripted, it wasn't performative, it was real. And that reality was becoming impossible to hide. New York had become their stage. But the world wasn't watching tennis anymore, and it was watching them. Every handshake, every smile, every glance became evidence. Every rumor grew a new leg to stand on. And every moment they tried to keep private seemed only to burn hotter under the spotlight. What started as a whisper had grown into a story neither of them could control. And perhaps neither of them wanted to. Because sometimes the truth doesn't hide inside the big moments. It hides in the quiet ones. And New York was full of them. By the time the U.S. Open reached its second week, the story was no longer about forehands, footwork, or match statistics. It had shifted into something far more delicate. The emotional reality of two athletes trapped between global expectations and a connection they could no longer disguise. For Iga Świątek, pressure is nothing new. She built her career on discipline so sharp it borders on ritual. The mental fortress, the headphones, the focus, but the entire world knows her as the player who keeps every feeling under lock and key. But in New York, cracks began to show. Not in her game, but in her composure. Journalists noticed it first. Her smiles lasted longer. Her interviews felt softer. And every time someone mentioned Hubert's name, even casually, her eyes shifted in a way that wasn't lost on those who study athletes closely. For Hubert Hurkacz, the change was equally striking. Usually gentle but distant, he became noticeably warmer, more expressive on and off the court. In press conferences, he brushed off questions about Iga with a shy grin, the kind that reveals more than it hides. And during matches, whenever she appeared in the stands, something shifted in his body language. His shoulders relaxed, his game sharpened. It was as if her presence steadied him. But here's the truth the public doesn't always see. In professional sport, affection is never simple. It comes with consequences. Coaches began whispering about distractions. Commentators speculated whether emotions were influencing performance. And the tabloids, hungry for drama, pounced on every new angle. The noise became impossible to escape. That was when the Dubai rumor emerged. A source close to the tournament claimed that once the U.S. Open ended, Iga and Hubert planned a private getaway to Dubai, a place where stars disappear when they need both luxury and anonymity. The rumor spread like wildfire because it made perfect sense. A desert sunrise far from cameras, a private yacht on calm water, two of Poland's brightest talents finally able to exist without judgment. Fans created edits imagining them walking along JBR Beach or sharing a quiet moment under the desert stars. And while none of it was confirmed, the possibility alone was enough to send the tennis world into a frenzy. But behind the romantic excitement lay a much harsher truth. The brighter the spotlight, the smaller the world becomes. Świątek found herself criticized for any dip in form, with pundits whispering that something off-court was affecting her focus. Hurkacz was asked, repeatedly, whether the rumors were true, and each time his hesitation fed the flames. Their families, according to people close to them, knew what was happening, and supported it. In Poland, where family approval carries enormous weight, this was no small detail. It hinted that whatever was unfolding between Iga and Hubert wasn't casual, wasn't impulsive, but something that might last. Yet the pressure remained. Every gesture between them was magnified, every shared glance became a headline, and every moment of privacy slipped further and further away. Still, they stayed close. Still, they found each other in the chaos. And sometimes that's the clearest sign of all. The question wasn't whether something was happening. The question was how far they were willing to go, and what price they were willing to pay for a connection the whole world was watching. As the season continued and the dust of New York settled, a strange shift occurred. The whispers around Iga Świątek and Hubert Hurkacz no longer sounded like rumors. They felt like the early chapters of a story still being written, slowly, quietly, and far away from the courts where they built their legacies. They returned to their tournaments, of course. They stepped back into their routines. The travel, the matches, the interviews, the relentless cycle of professional tennis resumed as if nothing had changed. Except something had changed. You could see it in the way Iga carried herself during warm-ups, a certain softness slipping into the edges of her otherwise razor-sharp discipline. You could see it in Hubert's expression during the handshake at the net, his calm demeanor masking the flicker of something deeper, something human. Even when they stood on opposite sides of the world, the story followed them. Reporters continued to ask. Fans continued to speculate. And social media rewrote the narrative every single day. But what fascinated everyone wasn't just the possibility of romance, it was the symbolism. Two Polish stars, one who rules the women's game with a steel mind, the other a quiet force on the ATP tour, suddenly standing at the edge of something personal and profound. In their successes, Poland saw pride. In their connection, people saw destiny. And yet, this is where the story shifts from speculation to something far more delicate, the cost of living under a spotlight that never switches off. Because if there's one truth athletes learn sooner or later, it's this: the world will always demand more of you than you can give. If Iga and Hubert are building something together, they're doing it under pressure few of us will ever understand. Every match becomes a test. Every camera angle becomes evidence. Every moment of silence becomes a story the media will try to fill. And so we reach the part of this journey where facts fade, and only questions remain. Are they simply two compatriots supporting each other through the loneliness of the tour? Or are we witnessing the foundation of a partnership that could redefine not just their careers, but the way Poland sees its heroes? Could this connection strengthen them, anchoring them through the brutal demands of the sport? Or might the same spotlight that created their story eventually tear it apart? These are answers only in time, and perhaps courage, will reveal. But here's what we do know. When two people find comfort in each other amid the chaos of global expectation, the world pays attention. And whether the story becomes a fleeting rumor or a legendary chapter in tennis history, one thing is certain. Świątek and Hurkacz have already captured the imagination of millions, and sometimes that alone is enough to change everything. So now the question is yours to answer. Do you believe Iga Świątek and Hubert Hurkacz are simply close friends? Or are we watching the quiet rise of tennis's next great power couple? And more importantly, how much of their lives should the world be allowed to witness? Tell me your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this deep dive storytelling, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It helps the channel grow and lets me bring you more untold stories from the world of sport. Because this story, it's far from over.